Ladies and gentlemen, to explore how emerging cloud architectures, advanced cyber defense strategies, and cross-domain collaboration frameworks can be integrated to enhance situational awareness, operational resilience, and decision superiority in today's contested battle space, please welcome Staffan Truve, co-founder and CTO of Recorded Future, Sam Kaplan, Assistant General Counsel for Public Policy and Government Affairs at Palo Alto Networks, and David Caswell, Microsoft Federal Security AI Leader. The conversation will be moderated by Brookie, Vice President for Technology Programs and Strategy at the Atlantic Council.
Thank you. So that is our cue.
Good.
But I have to admit, it's a little confusing on cues, and I will maintain wild operational or situational awareness for drones flying overhead, which is a long way of saying, on this panel, I got your 6, and our heads will be on a swivel. Thank you guys so much for joining us. For those of you that don't know me, my name's Brookie. I lead all of the tech programs at the Atlantic Council, which is a think tank that partners with the Special Competitive Studies Project. And there, we're structured in many ways like this conversation in that we have a lot of teams doing a lot of totally different things. And so that includes something called the Digital Forensic Research Lab, which I founded, which looks at open source intelligence in particular. It includes a cyber statecraft initiative, which is doing a lot of technical work on critical infrastructure and what state threat actors are doing. And at this kind of strategic level, a geotech center, which is kind of 40,000 feet above that, saying, okay, where are these trends going? What should we be doing? Where should we be looking at 10 years in the future? So with that as an introduction, the topic of this panel could be a conversation that lasts much like this Expo for 72 hours. We have 30 minutes, and so I won't do a huge amount of intro, other than to ask you one initial question to frame and then pivot to see where our conversation goes. Over the last decade, the battle space, as we define it, has evolved drastically. The boundaries between international and domestic, the boundaries between how we define war, both legally speaking and functionally speaking, has changed entirely. And a lot of that has to do with the domains that you all protect, especially the rise of the cyber and cloud domains. And so what are the challenges and what are the opportunities? What are the main changes there that define your day-to-day work? And I'll start all the way down and we'll come back towards me. And introduce yourself as you go.
Perfect. Thanks, Graham. Again, my name is Sam Kaplan. I'm the Assistant General Counsel for Policy at Palo Alto Networks. I'm a former Fed and have been in the private sector for about 4 years now. I really like your framing question with regard to how the battle space has changed, particularly over the past couple of years. When I think about it, I try to bucket it into really 3 sort of discrete areas, as I've seen how it's sort of changed. It's, first and foremost, it has grown. The attack surface has just exponentially grown. And this is both in how networks are constructed, how many critical organizations touch upon critical infrastructure, areas of our society that are crucial to our functioning. And that attack surface has just grown exponentially. And even from a technical level, when you look at sort of internet-facing attacks, like our Unit 42, which is our threat intelligence unit, in their most recent report, they've shown that 39% of the ransomware attacks and other attacks that we've seen on networks are actually already there from internet-facing vulnerabilities. So I think the growth in the attack surface is first and foremost. The second bucket is complexity. These networks have just grown infinitely more complex. And when you add cloud computing, even from sort of a big framework type perspective, when you add the cloud element on top of that, critical and sensitive data is stored in more locations and in more separate environments, and being able to defend that entire environment has just got infinitely more complex. And from a cyber perspective, even the cyber tools and capabilities we've seen that each organization, just in their cybersecurity suites, will have 30 to 70 different capabilities across their security enterprise in and of itself. So it's complex. And then the last, I think, to go on the theme from this expo, the speed. The speed with which we've seen adversarial actors being able to orchestrate attacks has just increased exponentially. For context, as recently as 2021, we saw the time from it took an adversarial actor to infiltrate a network to the time that they exfiltrate data. In 2021, that time delta would be about 9 days from the time they got into a network to when they started pulling data out there. In 2023, that had decreased to 2 days. And now, we see that in a period of hours, that they are making entree into these systems to exfiltrate. So the speed has just increased exponentially.
So to take a metaphor there, the world has grown, our forts are larger, more complex, harder to defend, and we're turning at a faster churn.
And we're turning at a faster churn, and that's exactly right.
David?
Yeah, thanks. So Dave Caswell, I'm from Microsoft. I'm the Federal Security AI leader there. When I think about what the modern kind of battle space looks like when we're talking about the confluence of security and AI, I think about two terms, like speed and precision, right? The AI landscape in the last several years, but particularly in the last 2 years, has created an enormous acceleration for both the offensive side, but also for the defensive side. On the offensive side, you can think about threat actors using these tools on scale in order to create novel attack techniques, which they can either launch as technical techniques, but more readily they're using it as a technique to change where the attack is occurring. It's no longer just a nation state on nation state, it's nation state on populace, it's nation state on commerce. So that changes quite a bit of the dynamics of the rules of war that traditionally we've adhered to as a modern society. When we think about it from the defender side, well, and so that's the speed. Now, the specificity is that attack is no longer a general hand-waving attack. So we're gone are the days where we conveniently knew that the email that said it was from a Nigerian prince is in fact not real, and we shouldn't click on that link. These attacks are now able to do spear phishing at an inordinate scale against any individual en masse globally. Now, it's not all doom and gloom, right? Because that same magnification that's helping the offensive side is inordinately helping the defensive side. And the defensive side as a community is building it in a manner that allows this layer upon layer upon layer of exponential increase in gains that I think we are starting to see now en masse, and I expect we'll see significantly increase over the future. And those exponential gains are in things like, how do we think differently about architecting our large, monolithic systems? How do we think differently about connecting these different systems that were not necessarily built right out of the box to connect together, but now we can start sharing data and talking across these ones, thinking just simple translator models that large language models can provide. But even more so, looking ahead, how can we start thinking about layering upon these for a balance of sensing, understanding the data, understanding in a manner that we can make decisions on, and or selecting them in order to do actions so that the response time is decreased substantially inside of that fight. And what that allows us to do is take the tens of thousands of cyber professionals we have defending all of our societal norms and really augment them and empower them in a manner that year over year over year we should start catching up, if not accelerating way past, hopefully, the adversary.
Quick follow-up on that. I love the term defender's dividend. Do you think the defender's dividend right now is more proactive than how adversaries are changing?
I think, man, that's a hard one. So is the defender dividend outpacing the adversaries?
If the answer is different tomorrow, I won't hold you to account for it.
Fair. I think the ability of the community writ large, right? These kind of, the folks in this kind of a forum, but also, right, writ large in the cybersecurity one, have an ability to do that magnification effect and go faster, right, and help provide that. There is still an unequal level of expectation on the offensive side, right? A script kiddie can rapidly pull something together in a few minutes and launch that. A commercial entity cannot send that out into the wild as a large product. So that time is going to have an effect. So I would say today, I don't know if we've necessarily fully overcome that, but we are seeing advents where we are taking defensive actions against the adversaries and doing things like inoculating the world in 5 minutes. I mean, like significant, substantial things that we couldn't even imagine, even 5 years ago.
Yeah, that makes sense. Staffan?
Yeah, hi, Staffan Truve, CTO of Recording Future. I mean, it's really hard to come after the two of you here because, I mean, I essentially have said the same things. Maybe adding two things then, I think, in terms of speed of change. I think one thing we're seeing, I mean, as you said, the attack surface is growing. I would say it's blurring. It's becoming harder to define. You know, all the private devices, everything else is getting more and more mixed up. But I think more importantly, we're also seeing that the attack surface is changing faster for companies. We're seeing that very clearly, that one of the hardest things for the defenders today is to just keep up, to have a correct definition of their own attack surface. You know, it's a constant struggle. They're always one or two steps behind on that. And at the same time, of course, we're seeing that the threat actors, their speed of innovation has also gone up, you know, enabled by technology. You know, they can now rapidly prototype new things and try them out. You know, it goes anywhere from I would say psychological attacks of various kinds, all the way to the starting, at least I think we're seeing, of AI-driven technical attacks, which we're fortunately not. We haven't really seen it at full scale yet. You know, it's still a bit of an academic exercise, but once they start to be rolled out, then it's going to be really tough for all of us.
Well, and even that one, the technical limitation, right? Some of that is, will we know that it was an AI-enabled zero-day, or is it just a zero-day that is now attacking the output?
Exactly.
And it doesn't matter, right?
Yeah,
like, I mean, from a security perspective, you got to, I use the analogy as like, someone's going to come running up to you. Do you care if it's a punch on the left hand or the right hand, or do you just stop getting punched? And that's where we're at.
So the AI hyphenates don't matter for defense or outcome, essentially. It might change how you're adapting,
I mean,
but
it's going to change volume and speed, right? So I think that's the way that you might be able to see it.
I think that's right. It's going to change the volume and the adversary's ability to change and pivot methodology. So if there is a new zero-day that gets developed by artificial intelligence, like how quickly can they pivot to develop a new one to go back and attack that same system? So that's another area where that complexity and speed, I think, is going to just add to the three-dimensional chess.
Yep.
And Sam, I saw that you wanted to jump in on the defender's dividend question, so I'll punch that to you. Staffan, one question that I have as a follow-up as Sam's answering the defender's dividend question, if the definition of attack surface is changing, who is changing it? The adversary or the defender? Which is a slightly different way to ask the defender's dividend question, but Sam, I saw you wanted to jump in.
Well, the thing on the defender's dividend that we have to keep in mind, and I'm a lawyer by trade, so I always look at sort of the regulatory and policy tail to a lot of these things. The other things that an adversarial actor is, they don't follow the EU AI Act. They don't follow GDPR. They are operating in a borderless, in a ruleless society, and where the cyber defenders really have to be mindful is we operate within those constraints and those areas of rule books. So that adds a dimension to that sort of defender's dividend versus the adversarial action that just heightens it and brings us more cross-jurisdictionally than I think we've appreciated before in the past.
Mm-hmm. And Staffan, who's changing the definition of attack space?
I mean, both sides, I would say. I mean, the defender or let's say the corporates or the organizations then are changing because how they're building systems. I mean, how you're opening up, how the borderline between your system and your partners, your suppliers, and so on is getting more fluid. That's one part. But I think the attacking side as well, I mean, as they see new ways to get into your system, I mean, that's also changing things.
And I would assume the comment on things like mixing psychological attack or information attack with infrastructure attack at the same time, or
and maybe even physical attacks, right? I think we need to look at those three as being more and more different modes of the same thing.
Are those the three domains that you think about the most, as opposed to, for instance, like technical domains, like the difference between cloud, hard cyber, kit?
I mean, to me, I would say cloud is just another aspect of the sort of a cyber domain, really. I mean, whether it's sort of if you're on the open cloud, or if you have your corporate cloud, or if you're old-fashioned on-prem, it's quite similar in many ways still.
To pick up on that, David, I'll go to you with a cloud-based question. Given your vantage leading AI security within Microsoft, how do you see the convergence of AI-driven cyber? Just to like unpack that a little bit more. Understanding that AI-driven attack is the same as an attack. How do you see the change that is happening, and how do you pivot in your day-to-day existence, leading a large business practice with a lot of surface area?
Yeah, and my business practice is generally in the federal space, so it's really enabling the federal clients to think and move forward on there. Writ large in Microsoft from a defense perspective, AI enablement, I mean, AI is being baked across all of the different enabling factors. We've done multiple studies trying to look at like what's the productivity increase that can occur from this one. And let's be clear, cyberspace historically, I think the latest numbers I saw was workforce down, 225, 500,000 in the US alone of open positions, right? This is a capability that we have to have in order to just catch up to the min requirement of the environment itself. And so when we think about how do we use AI inside of the security of, the security with AI as an enabling capability, it's everything from looking over all the different logs and synthesizing them in a manner that's complete and rapid. Trying to think through how do you automate the very complex regulatory processes that Sam, I know, loves dearly, in order to try to simplify that so that we can get out of the bureaucratic paperwork trails that is things like RMF and otherwise, which are all necessary to ensure that we have a secure baseline, but are absolutely a time lag of providing capability to the defenders that need that capability inside of that space. And so anywhere along that spectrum, regulatory, actual operations, deployment and code development, like AI is inordinately increasing the speed of which defenders are able to project that capability into the ecosystem and then hopefully have effects that are protecting all of society here.
I too am a recovering federal employee. Honored to be, thankful to be here, breathing the convention air and speaking in public. And the federal government in this area in particular is known for having enormous capacity and capability, but not being the fastest moving organization on the face of the, or series networks of organizations on the face of the planet. So in your view, is that workforce dearth the regulatory framework for either compliance or procurement in a big way? What are the main kind of holdups?
I look at it as, I mean, for those who are geeky enough in the room, I look at it as a Markov system. But anyway, there's a time to acquisition, right? And that time to acquisition is capability is now emergent and available for doing something better, faster, more impactful, right? We had a new time to acquisition of a starting point of, I mean, if you think about it, this is wild. I looked it up. November 2022, November 30th, 2022. What was that date? Anyone remember? Right? November 30th, 2022, a couple days after Thanksgiving, not quite Christmas. It's a completely dark time for general commerce, and that's when ChatGPT was released. Mm-hmm. That is less than, what, 3 years? I mean,
2.5.
2.5 years. I mean, that's a wildly fast release under a crazy, unconventional approach. But like to take that and say the government should now be embedding this into everything that they're thinking about, from weapon systems to technologies to operations to enablement, like that is light speed in government time. And that time is an acquisition time to acquire it, a risk time to determine is this safe and is this going to be able to be used in government systems, a testing time to go and make sure it's compliant and regulatory appropriate, another testing time to make sure it's RMF blocked and supported, and then that whole technical integration to actually put it into the system. That timeline is a timeline that is a gap created that the adversary can take advantage of. And that is something that absolutely, I think a lot of the things we're seeing in the DoD and otherwise right now are trying to do anything they can to shorten that while still maintaining the security controls that they have a risk appetite for in order to turn these things on and make them go faster for them.
Question of the group, but I think Staffan, on capabilities, and then we'll get to rules. We're gonna do the fancy stuff first, then we're gonna get to rules. What is the endpoint capability that would be ideal? For instance, how do you foresee something like ML, powered threat intel, integrating into the endpoint of a defender, whether they're in the corporate landscape or the government landscape? Like, what are the capabilities that they should have right now, noting that we are moving at light speed in 2.5 years for a federal government to adapt to a landscape is either caused by an existential thing or happening at light speed because we all agree that this is a priority?
I mean, real-time intelligence, I'm biased here, of course, but I think real-time intelligence is one of the key factors, to get it out quickly. I think the big challenge is to get it out quickly with quality. I mean, the big risk here is that we decide to move so quickly, and then our systems aren't really built for quick change. We all know the risk of something breaking when you patch it. We all know that you should be automatically patching based on the current threat landscape. But if you try to do that, the way systems are built today, that's going to create more havoc, maybe even than the adversaries. So I think, working towards, and this is, the huge challenge of software engineering, working towards a case where you could actually automate everything from the intelligence gathering to the decision making to the deployment of mitigations. It's a tremendous challenge.
So the endpoint being maybe not necessarily correct me if I'm wrong on this, maybe not necessarily the fanciest or highest capability, but a consistent capability that is deployed at scale.
That's one way of putting it, I think, yeah.
Okay, let's talk about rules. And I'll preface this by saying I served in government during the OPM hack and the DPRK hack of Sony. Mm-hmm. And much to your point on things happening at weird times in the year, DPRK or Sony hacks happened in the second week of December.
Always.
And I'm here to tell you that there is only one version of the world in which the president's family leaves for Christmas vacation, and he has to stay at the White House to deal with the cyber incident response. And this is the only way that you could get a president of the United States to watch a Seth Rogen movie over a holiday, which is, I believe, a true story. But more to the point, the hack happens. There's incident response over a holiday period because it is getting so much attention, and the key policy question was, okay, what can we get done in terms of information sharing? The key thing here is that information wasn't shared soon enough. It was a pretty straightforward intrusion, and there had been a policy proposal on the shelf for about 2 years. And I've never seen a cyber information sharing proposal get rolled out and approved by Congress more quickly than in that moment. Mm-hmm. That speed has also changed pretty drastically since December 2015 because of a number of other force majeure. But in your view, what does the regulatory landscape look like, especially for the federal government? And what needs to be either thrown out or adapted or revised or made quicker to adapt for this moment?
So from an information sharing standpoint, I think first and foremost, one of the important things that we need to look at are the current structures that are out there and that are up for reauthorization this year. For example, CISA 2015 is up for reauthorization this year. And what this does is it sets up voluntary information sharing principles, but more importantly, in addition to those being voluntary, they set up incentives for the private sector to encourage them to report to the federal government, to partner with the FBI, to partner with DHS, to partner with CISA. And this includes guaranteed protections of their information. They actually have a special classification to ensure that their info is not going out through FOIA. More importantly, there's liability protections that are available to the private sector organizations that avail themselves of sharing information under this. I think incentivizing those, looking at current regulatory structures that we have, and incentivizing that voluntary sharing where we can have a partnership between the public and private sector. So when Sony hacks, they know their first call is to the FBI cyber division or to their CISA representative. So I think let's look at the structures that we have. In the US in particular, the other thing that I would look at is really harmonization. Harmonization of cyber incident reporting regimes that are out there. If you look in the federal space, just with regard to critical infrastructure operators, which if you really look at the aperture of what's considered critical infrastructure, it's vast majorities of companies that work across sectors. You have an SEC reporting requirement for publicly traded companies. You have critical infrastructure reporting requirements that are in the process of being finalized. You have federal contractors. So arguably, you could have one organization that is subject to 3 different incident reporting requirements just by being publicly traded and I think my microphone went off, but just by being publicly traded, a member of the critical infrastructure, and a government contractor. And that's 3 incident reporting regimes that you have to follow. So I think harmonization is critically important. And then the last is making sure that the information that requires can be used for tactical cyber defense purposes. This isn't reporting for reporting's sake, situational awareness. You need to send TTPs, threats, indicators, actionable intelligence that the defenders can use to bolster their cyber defenses. So if I had a magic wand, that's what I would look at.
It's a little like having your most sensitive information or potentially embarrassing information being the largest public service that you could possibly give as an actor in as a team member in this space or a community member in this space. Staffan?
I was going to say, so I mean, not only in the US, but I think globally where we operate, I would say that the biggest problem is that companies, when they share with governments, they feel like they're sending it into a black hole. They very seldom get anything back out of it. We actually launched our own program now to do sharing between our, within our customers and beyond that. And I think that's going to happen. I think the corporate side needs to do this on their own. You can't trust government to be the place where you send it and expect to get it back fast enough, at least. So I think that as a trend, and we were actually talking with, I think, both your companies as well on how we can do that as a bigger scale.
Well, I mean, to your point, if you share information about a sensitive matter with the FBI field office in San Jose, but your attack landscape includes jurisdictions that the GDPR applies to, and you're trying to share because your legal entity is in Belgium, then you're actually sharing with 12 different national entities that might not be talking to each other. That's really, really difficult. We're nearly coming to time, and so I'll ask one closing question to the group on this topic or on this thread. In terms of Sam, what you're referring to as harmonization, where in your day-to-day existences as leaders in this field, where are you most optimistic about harmonization or testing among partners, whether they're industry partners or government partners or civil society, academia? Like what makes you most excited or optimistic that we will actually, within that defender's dividend, be more proactive and better situated than the adversarial landscape as it grows, becomes quicker, and as our networks become more complex? And we can go in whichever direction.
Go ahead.
Dave?
Oh, I'll say it. I'm most optimistic about the sincere desire to get in this space, right? It's not just like cloud adoption took a tremendously long time. There was a lot of misgivings and such about it, but there is a sincere desire by many leaders, even if they don't necessarily understand the technical nuances about it, they can see the productivity gains that are occurring by it, and they're sincerely interested and invested in trying to enhance the cyber workforce to really empower them in this space. And I think that is going to be the biggest indicator of ability to be successful, is when we have that leadership drive to really leverage the capabilities to the fullest.
I think one really important point on that, to your earlier point on 2,500 some odd jobs that are available right now, even if we filled those jobs tomorrow and we had a workforce that was wildly expanded beyond that, there would still be stuff to do.
Yes.
And it would be interesting stuff. And I hope that somebody at the job fair stand in the corner is making that pitch. And if you aren't, then maybe you go after it. Staffan?
I was going to say, I've actually started to say, I've been spending too many years saying exactly this, that we have too few people. I think it's time to be more open and say that we have too little automation. I think, it's more important now to enable the workforce we have today than to find the new people. And since we failed for decades to do that, I think, we have to acknowledge. And I am very optimistic. I think, what we're seeing in terms of the emergence of AI is that it's becoming much, much more feasible to actually help both augment the workforce and automate a lot of things to free up time for them.
And Sam?
I would say the area that I'm probably most optimistic, to sort of pivot off a little bit of what Staffan says, I think there is a recognition that cybersecurity in particular is one of those use cases where artificial intelligence has the potential to really keep that defender's dividend tipped in the defender's direction. And I think there is a recognition across jurisdictions to sort of locking down the critical components of that AI for cyber defense space. The information that goes in to train these systems, the folks that are trained to work at those, and then the capabilities to be able to deploy those, that is really going to be the biggest force enabler. And I do think there is a recognition across governments that this is an area that we can really capitalize on.
And will be expansive, relevant, and absolutely necessary in a way that is going to just increase in scale by the time we have this conversation at next year's Expo. Yeah. So I want to thank Staffan Truve, co-founder and CTO of Recorded Future, Sam Kaplan, Senior Director and Assistant General Counsel, Palo Alto Networks, and David Caswell, Federal AI Security Lead at Microsoft. And thank you all so much for spending the time. I hope the rest of your Expo is excellent.
Thank you.